What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We are coming to you after Game 3, a loss for the Cavs on home court to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and it was ugly. It was real ugly. Chris, I want to just get your initial reaction to how this game panned out, especially with how the Celtics came back in the third quarter and just jumped off to a big lead like they have in the past couple games.
It's interesting because the Cavs got off to a good start, guys. Offensively, they were doing some good things. Defensively was problematic. They were giving up too many threes in the first quarter. But offensively, it seemed like it was a carryover from game 2, where they found ways to exploit the Celtics defense, when they found ways to attack mismatches. Donovan Mitchell's shot making was a big part of the Cavs getting off to a strong start offensively. But the first quarter featured 11 lead changes in 4 ties, and the two teams were going back and forth, and the Cavs were kind of hanging around. But after the first quarter, they didn't lead again the rest of the way. And I feel like it's kind of a microcosm of their season. I feel like it's kind of a microcosm of their offense in general. And you saw it a lot throughout the course of the final 3 quarters tonight against Boston. They have a plan going in. It feels like they're doing some positive things. It feels like they're trying to create movement and triggers within the offense. But when those things are taken away because the other team knows that the Cavs want to do those things, and the other team is scouting the Cavs and they understand the Cavs' strengths and weaknesses, when those things start getting taken away, the Cavs' offense just kind of devolves into nothing. There are too many wasted possessions. There are too many empty possessions. This is the playoffs now. You can't have that many empty possessions or that many possessions where you just have absolutely nothing going and somebody has to try and play savior at the end of the shot clock. So I thought that was the thing that stood out to me in this loss in Game 3. They held the Celtics to 106. That is very difficult to do. Boston only made, and I say only because their standards are so high, Boston only made 13 three-pointers. So when you hold the Celtics to 13 made threes and you hold them to 106 points, that should be a working formula for success. Only it wasn't. In part because the Cavs had a wretched start to the third quarter where they just got blitzed 14-0, but also because their offense just wasn't good enough again. And it's been a running theme in postseason basketball for this team. No matter what iteration of this team we're talking about, they just haven't been consistently good enough on the offensive end of the floor. And until they become more dynamic offensively, until they become more diverse offensively, until Donovan Mitchell gets more consistent help, I feel like you're going to have more and more games like this.
I think tonight's game is a lesson in how complete a performance it requires to beat the Boston Celtics, right? Like, the Cavs lost this game and I don't know how long did that 14-0 run take? Like 3-4 minutes? Yeah, 3-4 minutes. Just like that, game's over. I mean, they did a good job fighting back, but you can't be trying to play catch up against this team because they're too talented. They can come at you too many different ways. And to Chris's point about the offense, yeah, there were some nice moments, even individually. Like Karis LeVert, really good second half. Where was it in the first half when you were 0 for 4? Evan Mobley in the first half looked a lot like the guy that we saw in Game 2. Yeah. In the second half, for a bunch of different reasons, the Cavs found some other lineups that worked in the second half without Mobley in the game with Dean Wade at the 5. We'll talk more about that later. But like, Evan Mobley's offense came and went. I mean, Donovan Mitchell had a spectacular first half, and I'm not going to blame him for tailing off in the second half, but like, it's just too much. I don't know. It's like if this were if the Cavs offense, if the Cavs performance as a whole were a painting, we're trying to like color in a a rectangle here. There's too many splotches. Like, you did a really good job over here. You did a really good job over here. What's this big blank space here in the middle where you got nothing done? I think that's the theme here. It's just a little scatter shot. Whereas Boston can afford to be more scattershot because when they do well, they do very well. They can get you out of here in a very short period of time. And they are just over the long haul a more consistent team because they have more options.
Yeah, and speaking of more options, it helps when you have two players that score over half of the points for your entire team. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, we obviously knew coming into this series that they were going to be big for the Boston Celtics. They combined for 61 points in Game 3. Those two guys alone showed a lot of what they were able to do. Obviously, Jason Tatum has struggled in the first two games of the series, and then he came out. And Tristan Thompson talked about it before the game and shoot around pregame and stuff like that, saying that they understood that Jason knew that he had played bad in the first two games. He was going to come out and be aggressive in Game 3, and that's exactly what he did. And J.B. Bickerstaff said it after the game. Those guys hit tough shots. Could the Cavs have done better on closeouts? Could they have been better at reading where the ball was going to go before it got to their hands? Sure. But there were multiple different times where I was sitting in the arena watching Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown take these shots that we would sometimes consider reckless, and they just made them go in. And sometimes that's a shooter's role or whatever it is. But those two guys were phenomenal for the Boston Celtics and pretty much carried them for the remainder of the game. Jimmy, can you talk about what you saw from them specifically, and then just how they were able to get to their spots and even make those tough shots?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a shooter's bounce. I would call it star power. Like, this is what these guys do. This is what makes Boston such a frustrating team to guard, is because even if you cut off all their pet actions, even if you do a great job staying home on all the shooters, or you don't allow penetration that would force help off the shooters, sometimes Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can be stuck somewhere, pivot a few times, shoot over you, and it goes in, man. Like, that's what those guys do. And I mean, to the Tatum point, I still think there's plenty of room for Jason Tatum to play better in this series. I know he had 33 points. I think he did a good job of attacking the rim more tonight. Getting to the free throw line, still 2 for 8 from 3, still 5 turnovers from him. Offensive, I think defensively he was pretty good. Offensively, 5 turnovers, and still, I mean, you take the good with the bad. Still some questionable shots. I think his shot selection is always going to leave a little bit of something to be desired, but sometimes it works out for them, man. Like, this team is, it goes to the point. Like, this is a microcosm of the point I was just making. How complete you have to play to beat the Boston Celtics. On any given possession, you can defend them really well for 20 plus seconds, and then someone just makes a really difficult shot.
It's just a situation where, coming into this series, we knew that the margin for error for Boston was significantly different than the Cavs' margin for error. And look, Boston has moments throughout the course of a game where they just have really, really, really lows. But like, their highs, when they're rolling, when they're at their best, it's very difficult for any team in the NBA to match that, right? And they find a way. They have led by at least 20 points in more than 50% of their games. So it's just, they're able to overcome their own issues at times. They're able to overcome their own poor shot selection at times. They're able to overcome their own lackadaisical attitude at times, because they have so much firepower and they have so many different places where they can go. They can go to Tatum, they can go to Brown, they can go to Drew Holiday. He made Donovan Mitchell work tonight. He kept going to the basket and getting to his floater and his hooks and his layups. And you didn't see that from Drew Holiday in the first 2 games of this series. Derek White didn't even have to be great tonight for the Celtics, the way that he was in Game 1. In Game 1, he looked like Stephen Curry. Since then, he's looked like, I don't know, Gary Payton II or something like that. So they're able to withstand any team consistently going on a run, And they're able to withstand like guys not playing to the level that they need to play at. Whereas the Cavs, if they don't get the guys playing to their standard, if they don't get the guys playing to the level that they can play at, that they need to play at, it's going to be hard for them to generate enough offense. And Donovan Mitchell scored 33 points tonight. He was great when it came to shot making. He made 7 threes. But it feels like it's a similar story for this team where he just didn't get enough help. Darius Garland was 6 of 15 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. That's not good enough. They need Darius to be a different guy than what he has been throughout the course of this postseason. And maybe he's not the guy, right? Maybe he's not the guy destined to be Donovan Mitchell's running mate. That's a conversation probably for the offseason. But there aren't positive signs about it at this point. They need more from him. Karis LeVert was just a no-show in the first half. Turned it around in the second half, and he was really, really good when the Cavs were making their push, especially early in the fourth quarter. But it's just like the Cavs need more from the supporting cast around Donovan consistently to hang with this caliber team. Like, it's one thing against Orlando. It would probably be one thing if they were playing against the Indiana Pacers. This is the top team in the Eastern Conference. And the Cavs just need more than what they're getting from Donovan's supporting cast. Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, like, got to have more from those two starters. They combined for 8 total points. That's not good enough.
And I wanted to go into one of the other players that we want to see more from on the offensive end. That's Evan Mobley. And again tonight, Evan Mobley tweaked his ankle for what seems like the umpteenth time this season, second time this postseason, and he was able to come back and actually had a halfway decent fourth quarter, a couple of dunks. But what I found most interesting about Evan Mobley was something that he said afterwards, after the game, talking about how the Celtics guarded him differently, that they threw more bigger, more burlier players at him to defer him from the paint. But he also understood that they were switching, and even when they would be switching, they would bring another big for the help or to just switch it back almost immediately. So he was unable to take advantage of those mismatches. The thing that he said that stuck out to me was that they cannot keep doing the same thing over and over when it's not working. And that's literally the opposite of what JB Bickerstaff said when he was talking about how the Cavs can come back from deficits. Run the same play over and over, and you'll just begin to chip away. And I think that's partially what I'm going to be writing about for tomorrow morning for my observations of tonight's game for cleveland.com. But I just wanted to get your sense of what that is, like the discrepancy between the coach saying that they should be running it back to back to back and trying to figure out and fight through what works, and then the supposed unicorn and star and supposed and should be the next best offensive player on this team in Evan Mobley, and him saying that he cannot run the same play, especially if it's not working.
Look, I mean, I think there's a give and take when it comes to all of this. I think Evan might have said it poorly in his postgame, but I understand where he's coming from. I understand that he's saying, like, if they're going to slow our offense down, if they're going to change up their looks, if they're going to make adjustments, then we've got to get into different actions around those kinds of base things that we're trying to do. But look, like, this is one of the issues that comes with playing against a team that is a switch-heavy defense. And this is the trap that Boston fell into in Game 2. The Cavs went to their switch-heavy approach in Game 2, and they almost baited Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown into attacking in isolation situations rather than running through the offense because they felt like they were advantageous matchups for them. There's a give and take there because on one hand, you have Jaylen Brown and you have Jason Tatum in advantageous matchups, and you feel good about that because of the kind of shot makers they are, because of the shot creators that they are. On the other hand, that limits Derek White, that limits Drew Holiday, that limits, Al Horford, Sam Hauser, whoever it is. But for the Cavs, like, part of the reason why they were so successful in game 2 is because they were able to exploit mismatches. Evan Mobley found himself on, Jason Tatum and Derek White and Drew Holiday and Peyton Pritchard at times, because the Celtics are going to switch 1 through 4. Sometimes they're going to switch 1 through 5. That allowed tonight Donovan Mitchell to have one-on-one opportunities with Al Horford, where he was able to attack his feet, where he was able to either blow by him at the rim or create space for his pull-up three. It allowed Darius Garland to attack Al Horford. Karis LeVert was attacking Al Horford as well, because those are advantageous matchups for the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell also had times where he was hunting Sam Hauser or he was hunting Peyton Pritchard. I think that's smart. I think that's a level of attention to detail that you need to have to find the matchup that you feel comfortable with and see if you can exploit that. I just think from the Cavs perspective, when it came to Evan specifically, it's different when it's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum than when it's Drew Holiday and Derek White, right? So I do think there is part of me that says, look, this is a switch-heavy defense that Boston is going to play. And that means Donovan's going to have good matchups at times. And that means Darius is going to have good matchups at times. And that means at times so is Evan Mobley. And it's on those guys to capitalize on them. There's another part of me that says that, in a way, is also playing into the hands of Boston. And this is Boston, right? This is the top team in the Eastern Conference. This is a conundrum that they often put you into. This is a conundrum that other teams have not been able to solve. Miami wasn't able to solve it either. Not to the point where they were able to win the series in the first round. And yeah, part of that was because they didn't have Jimmy Butler. But it's a predicament that you're in. And I don't know that there's an easy answer, if we're being perfectly honest.
I mean, look, to the Mobley point, I think he's just not the kind of guy that you can throw the ball to and say do stuff yet. That doesn't mean he right. That doesn't mean he never will be. It's just I think another part of the reason why he was really good in game 2 is because of the attention that Boston was showing the guards, right? Like it was a result of sort of a domino effect of Boston throwing extra attention at Mitchell's way, and then Mobley kind of being able to play as the short roller, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that Mobley's just a work in progress. But what Chris said about Boston getting baited in game 2, I think is really important, because I think that's what the Celtics were trying to do with Donovan in the first half at times. Like, I'm writing about this for tomorrow morning, and I have to double check this tally, but I have 13 of Donovan's 23 first half points coming with Al Horford as the primary defender on that play. And not all of them were straight switches. Sometimes Horford just got cross-matched with Donovan, which is like in transition. They're running back, and the Cavs are trying to push the pace, and the Celtics are just trying to match up men, and that's just how it worked out. Al Horford's on Donovan. They give him the ball. Donovan cooks. And I asked Donovan about this in the post-game presser. I asked him, like, how do you balance attacking the matchup they give you with trying to empower your teammates? Because as we all know, there was a lot. One of the big storylines from game 2 was Donovan being very intentional about starting this game slower from an attack mode standpoint. I think he only had 6 first half points. He very much made it a point to get his teammates involved, and it worked well for the Cavs. But what he said tonight that I think is really important is that it's a balance for him. And that may sound like kind of generic coach player speak, but I think what I'm saying here is I don't think Donovan got baited tonight. I think he knew what the Celtics were doing. I also think he just recognized some of my guys don't have it right now.
Right.
And Boston's Jason Tatum is heating up in the first half.
Yeah.
So like if we're gonna be in this game to start the second half, I gotta start making some shots.
Mm-hmm.
So it is true that Donovan going it out the way he did, or the one play where he did go after Sam, or he was targeting Pritchard. That snatchback crossover they had on Derek White was really nice too. I know Derek White's a good defender. That's not a guy you're targeting, but a lot of one-on-one stuff from Donovan. It does play into Boston's hand. Boston is trying to switch that way to get Cleveland out of its usual offense. It's also sometimes what you got to do when you're Donovan Mitchell and that the guys around you aren't starting that. And it's the chicken or the egg situation, right? Because it's like Donovan's like, okay, these guys don't have it. I have to go. But someone like Karis LeVert might say, well, this guy's taking all the shots. So how do you expect me to find a rhythm? I'm only 0 for 4. Maybe if you let me take 8 shots, I'd be 4 for 8. It's a tough balance. It really is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about that with Donovan is what he said afterwards, talking about that he knew that he was getting hot and he knew that Jason Tatum was also getting hot. And he said, I'm not going to stop, because he understood the moment. And I think that's the biggest thing that we've seen, or the biggest thing that JB Biggerstaff has harped on multiple times, is understanding the moment, understanding what the team requires in certain situations. Mm-hmm. And Donovan has been the guy all season to be able to defer to others when needed, or just take over when needed. And obviously we've written this about abundance of times now, that if Donovan Mitchell doesn't get help, this team is going to be in deep, deep waters. And Donovan Mitchell cannot do it himself, but he sure is going to try. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on, that Jimmy mentioned, is the cross matches and bringing the ball up the court. And Evan Mobley, when he gets the defensive rebounds, has been more so bringing the ball up himself and kind of, like you said, Jimmy, hunting matchups and just in transition looking for who he thinks is an advantageous matchup and then going at that person, or creating while in the dribble. We saw in game 2, he had multiple assists while doing that. And I think that's something that the Cavs can look more for, especially with Donovan wanting to get off the ball, because he played 43 minutes tonight. So
this is why I think results-based discourse is so bothersome to me at times. In game 2, the Cavs did a lot of the same things that they were trying to do tonight. It didn't work to the same level tonight, but they were trying to do the same things. And if we go back to game 2, all of the conversation following that was game plan discipline, attention to detail, focus, understanding the Celtics' defensive game plan and attacking mismatches, exploiting weaknesses, like all that different stuff. There was a lot of ISO stuff in game 2, but it worked. It worked to the level where the Cavs won the game. And they got praised for doing those things repeatedly. Right now, because it doesn't work, now because they scored 93 points, now because they have another terrible offensive rating, it's like, oh, the process was bad. They should have been doing this, and this. Like, yeah, at some point when it's not working to the level that you want it to be working, then you make an adjustment, you change some things. But was the process bad, or was the execution bad? Was the process bad? Or was it the fact that the Cavs just didn't convert the same kind of way? So if we go back to game 2, the Cavs, they attacked the paint relentlessly. They took a handful of their shots, almost half of their shots at the rim. But in game 2, they were 23 of 32 at the rim. Tonight, they took the same number of shots at the rim. They still tried to assault the Boston paint, because they recognize Porzingis isn't there, because they recognize there are some mismatches, because they recognize that they can attack Al Horford off the dribble, and every now and then they can probably attack Jason Tatum off the dribble because he has lapses on the defensive end of the floor. But they were 18 of 33 tonight at the rim. So they didn't have the same level of efficiency. It's just, sometimes you do things correctly. Sometimes you identify positive matchups for you. Sometimes you recognize the way that a team is guarding you and you feel like you're attacking it the right way. And it just doesn't work because you don't get the desired results. Like, there were multiple times in the first half where I turned to Joe Varden from The Athletic, who sits next to me at every single game. And, Donovan made the right play. Darius made the right play. They kicked it out to Isaac Okoro. He's wide open from 3. He misses the 3. That's the right play, right? Maybe Boston wants the Cavs to do that, but that's the right basketball play. And also, if Isaac's going to be on the court, he's got to take that shot. He can't pass up that shot. He's just got to make it. You know what I mean? So, like, if you make the right play and you get Isaac Okoro a wide open 3 and he misses the shot, is that bad process? Like, if Darius Garland sees that one of his defenders is going to go under a screen or Al Horford is going to be dropping back a little bit further, he was up higher in game 3 than he was in game 2. But if he's still dropping back and Darius identifies that and he takes the shot and he misses the 3-point shot, is that bad process? Is that bad offense? Or is it just a bad result? And I think too often the line gets blurred there.
Yeah.
I also go ahead.
I just wanted to give a quick stat for Chris's point, because both the Cavs weren't able to convert in the paint. Like, he gave those stats for that, and then also while shooting from beyond the arc, they were 12 of 36 from 3-point range. 7 of those came from Donovan Mitchell. Like, that's execution, because a lot of those shots were open looks. It was just being able to convert those and get opportunities for them to create those shots. But it's just understanding what the Cavs are going against, especially with the defense of the Boston Celtics also prioritizing the Cavs on the exterior now. But go ahead, Jimmy.
Chris also said a couple times, like, when we were going through these hypotheticals, it's the right basketball play, but it's also what the Celtics want. That's not a great place to be, right?
No, that's a roster composition issue,
it is.
though.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So I want to use that. So, like, how many times during this game would you Cavs have the ball? You've just put the average basketball observer, watches a lot of Cavs, next to you, press spacebar, pause the clip, and you ask them what should happen here. Like, okay,
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell has Al Horford on him. What should happen? They're probably going to say what? Go at Al Horford. Okay,
Go at Al Horford.
Good, right decision. Also, probably what the Celtics want. Donovan Mitchell, getting some extra attention on a drive. Isaac Okoro open in the corner. They're helping with Isaac Okoro's man. Press spacebar, press pause. What should happen here? Probably pass the ball to Isaac Okoro, right? Okay, right decision. I would introduce a third concept here. So, is it bad process? Is it bad result? Or is it bad matchup? Like, the Celtics are a bad matchup for everyone. At a certain point, there's only so many schematic counters you can come up with before you just come to, well, maybe they have a better team, and the Cavs might just have to play better than they usually do, and the Celtics might have to play a little worse than they usually do. Maybe that's not the most. I'm sorry for our listeners if that's not the most enticing or cutting analysis, but that might just be what we're dealing with here.
Yep. And here's the other thing. I think the Celtics are totally fine with Evan Mobley post-ups. I really do. If they're against Jaylen Brown, I think they're fine with it. I think the only time they're not fine with it is if it's maybe Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser. Like, you can probably pick individual matchups where they're a little bit queasy with Evan in the post, but he's just not a polished post-up player at this point. He's not. He's a still developing offensive player that doesn't really have a go-to move, doesn't really have too many counters, and I think they understand, like, Jaylen Brown may be giving up size and length, but he's strong enough, he's burly enough against an unpolished post-up player. You know what I mean? Same thing when it comes to Jason Tatum to some degree. Drew Holiday can battle with anybody 1 through 5. He has shown that throughout the course of his career. So, if they're going to switch 1 through 5 or something like that, the Cavs are going to look at it and say, well, look, there's a 7-footer that's down in the paint. He's in the post. He's got to be aggressive. We've got to get him the ball. But I think Boston's okay with that. I really do. I don't think they're all that worried about the Evan Mobley post-ups. If he continues to burn them over and over and over again, and the paint is so lopsided in favor of the Cavs, then maybe they think about doing different things. But I don't see them bringing a second defender because they're worried about that. Like, I don't see them leaving Max Strus. I don't see them leaving Darius. I don't see them leaving Sam Merrill when he's in the game. You know what I mean? So that's just going to be up to Evan, if he is in those situations, to be more consistent and more effective in them. And maybe he's just not ready to be that. Not consistently, anyway. Maybe it's just going to continue to be flashes throughout the course of this series, where Game 2, he was a dominant unicorn-like figure, and here in Game 3, he was fine. His stat line was good. He was doing some things offensively and some things defensively, but it just wasn't the same dominant type game for him.
And I think that goes for everybody. Evan Mobley in the post, are the Celtics losing sleep over that? No. I think it goes like I think they would probably feel the same way about everyone else not named Donovan Mitchell in those mismatch situations. I think the playoffs, I think everyone ideally wants their offense to look beautiful and have 5 people moving as one, whatever. But when it comes down to it in the playoffs, you're hunting mismatches. That's how offense works at this time of year. And I think you could make the case that maybe you want to let Darius and Karras hunt those mismatches a little earlier to try to catch a rhythm as the series goes on, because it's clear that it took them too long to get started tonight.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think the Celtics are looking at, on most possessions, Karras LeVert against Al Horford, who is very old but was a capable defender in his day and still has something of that. They would say, hold on, you're breaking your offense now to let Karras LeVert play one-on-one? Yeah, we're going to let you do that. Darius Garland, same way, particularly because how much he's been struggling recently. Prime Darius, peak Darius, all-star Darius, different conversation. Mm-hmm. Not the guy we're saying right now. If you're going to break your offense off to let that guy go one-on-one, the Celtics are going to be okay with that. We can talk in circles all we want, but I think we're coming to a conclusion here where most of what the Cavs can throw at Boston, they're equipped to handle and they're fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Cavs had 4 people score in double figures, and the remaining 6 players that touched the floor scored 13 points. That's, first of all, not physically going to do anything for the Cavs offensively. And we've talked about, if the Cavs can't score 100 points, that this is going to be a very, very long series, or the other way, a short series.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, they held the Boston Celtics to 106, and they couldn't score over 100 points. If they score 100 points, it's a close game, but it just didn't happen. And then you touched on the Evan Mobley mismatches, and you touched on Drew Holiday, Chris, and how he was also somebody that the Celtics are not afraid of Evan Mobley going against. That also might have to do something with the fact that Drew Holiday posted up Evan Mobley twice in today's game, and
He's strong, man. Drew Holiday's very strong.
He's definitely
through
strong.
His chest.
But the amount of height differential that you have, and you're still getting pushed around by somebody that's 6'4", maybe, and that might be being generous. It doesn't. And he did it with ease. He literally set up, put his hand out, said, I'm going to post up this 7-footer for the second time today, after doing it the first time, and it was like a surprise. He said, oh, I have this in my bag. And that, it threw me off, because you would think in those matchups, Evan Mobley would be the one screaming for the ball, but that didn't happen in game 1 and game 2 when he was matched up against Drew Holiday in the paint. So that definitely makes sense, Chris. And also to the point about the scoring output for the different teams, the Celtics had, I believe, 4 players score or 5 players score in double figures, and the rest of the players that they had come onto the court still outscored the Cavs' other players. They had 15 to the Cavs' 13 role players. So it's just getting the back to the flow. Like we said, the shooting wasn't there tonight. The drives to the paint wasn't there tonight. Something's got to go, or the Cavs are going to be gentlemen swept, because this is.
As Donovan was walking off the podium, I showed him a post on X, and it came from NBA.com/stats. So this is the second time in Donovan's career that he has recorded 180 plus points and 20 plus 3-point makes on 50 plus shooting from the field over a 5-game span in the postseason. So this covers the final 2 games against Orlando, and it covers the first, that's bad math. Yeah, the first 3 against the Celtics. So this is the second time in his career that he has done that. No other player has done this once. Okay? So this is the kind of heater that Donovan is on. This is the kind of level that Donovan is playing to. And we talked coming into this playoff run for the Cavs how it was going to be, in part, a referendum on Donovan, right? Could he live up to the superstar standard? Could he bounce back and show that playoff Spida was still in there? The guy who early in his career was looked at as a big-time 16-game performer. The guy who shines brightest on the game's biggest stage. The last 2 playoff series, it's well documented, was not good against the Knicks, was not good against the Mavericks the year before that when he was in Utah. So he was out to correct that. And he has. He has been even better than the Cavs could have hoped, especially over the last 5 games. Like, this run that he is on is incredible. It's LeBron James-like, right? It's Kyrie Irving-like when he just decimated the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. It's the things that we would expect from a superstar player. So I showed him this stat, and he turned to me and he says, not enough. Not enough. And like, I paused and I was like, but it should be. It should be. Because it wasn't supposed to be this. It wasn't supposed to be Donovan and the others, right? It was supposed to be a core 4. And Jared Allen missing is a big deal here because he was, at the time that he got hurt, he was probably their most effective and impactful player. He was probably playing at a higher consistent level than Donovan. So missing him obviously is a big deal. But this was supposed to be a core 4. This was supposed to be a formidable starting lineup with Max Strus coming in this past offseason and becoming the missing piece, bringing a different dynamic, bringing some shooting, floor spacing, movement, all that kind of stuff. This was a bench that during the regular season, guys, was about middle of the pack. Very, very different than last year when it was the 3rd worst scoring bench in the entire NBA. And it's like, Donovan playing to this level, doing this on a nightly basis against the East's best team, it shouldn't be a situation where he looks at it and says, not enough.
The last thing you want to do if you're the Cavs right now is remind Donovan of the Utah team that decided that they had to rebuild basically after that Dallas playoff exit. He left. He didn't request a trade. However you want to frame the Donovan Mitchell Utah exit, I'm not going to put words in his mouth. He got out of there. The reason he is here is because they weren't doing enough for him. So if we're talking about numbers that he put up there and didn't get it done, and that we're comparing that to what's happening here, that's an ominous statistic.
Yeah.
All right. Last question of the podcast. What did you guys think of Dean Wade and his return to the court since March 8th?
This is something to monitor here, okay? He hurt his knee again in the game. Did anybody see that? He appeared to tweak his knee in the fourth quarter, and he called for a sub. So, and he also wasn't present in the locker room after the game because I'm told he was getting treatment on his knee.
I did see him, for what it's worth, I did see him walk across the court like in the after hours, and he seemed to walk okay.
Yeah. So, like, this is something to monitor because a big part of when he was going to be able to come back and help the Cavs was about, okay, how does his body respond to increased physical activity, another shoot around, another practice, like all that kind of stuff. How does his body respond going into Monday? That is something to watch. I like the fact that the Cavs have more options available to them now with Dean. He was playing small ball 5 tonight. That's not something that the Cavs obviously had available to them because he was missing for 2 months. They were able to go with a more offensive heavy lineup with him at the 4, provide some spacing, provide some shooting. He's a better rebounder than George Niang. He's a better rebounder at this stage of his career than Marcus Morris Sr. He's a better rebounder at the 4 than Max Strus if they have to downsize that kind of way. So I thought he was fine in the first half. Second half was a little bit iffy. I think asking him to play the small ball 5 was a lot after 2 months off. Like, that's not really, he doesn't know those responsibilities to the same level. He doesn't know the play calls and what the 5 does on a specific play call the same kind of way that he does with the 4. The spacing's probably a little bit different. The things that he's asked to do probably a little bit different. But I think you could see like why the Cavs believe he can be an asset in this particular series against Boston. And I think you can see why the Cavs felt like they were missing a piece of their rotation, both in the Orlando series and the first 2 games against these Celtics. I thought he played more than I thought he was going to coming into this game. But part of that was out of necessity. And I thought part of that was out of the way that he played in the first half. JB was like, okay, he gave me something in the first half. The things that we like from Dean Wade, he showed in the first half. So let's give him another run here in the second half. Let's continue to try different things with him in the second half. So I think he can be an asset moving forward if he can stay healthy and remain effective.
He can also continues to be picking up right on track where he left off. A plus minus god. He was the Cavs' best box plus minus guy. 12. Plus 12. One of 2
in a game
positive
that they
Cavs.
lost by 13.
Right. One of 2 positive Cavs in that regard. The other, Sam Money Merrill. Shout out to the subtexters. But yeah, I think, like Chris said, you see why Cleveland missed him so much. As I think I made the analogy during the Orlando series, Dean Wade is like the just right porridge, not too hot, not too cold. He's not like Isaac Coro's over here. What do you want to call that? Too hot or too cold? Too much defense, not enough offense.
Mm-hmm.
George Niang's over here. Actually, not. He's an empty bowl at this point. There's no porridge in that bowl. I was gonna say too much offense, not enough defense, but he's not giving you anything right now.
Right.
Dean Wade is both, in theory, because he made his first 3 tonight, and then he missed 3. I think there was one where even Boston let him take, which is something to monitor going forward if they don't respect him the way that they should when Dean is playing at his best. That's something worth monitoring. But yeah, I mean, the Cavs made their second half push with Dean Wade on the court, with Dean Wade at the 5. I agree that's a lot to ask of him, although he did it really good. He did make one that jumps out to my mind, like protecting the rim. I think Tatum was going to the rim and he challenged him and forced a miss at the rim, which is more promising data for the Dean Wade at the 5, however new that is. I think they're probably going to need him to play more if they want to be competitive in this series, which is I mean, a tough place to be with a guy who just came back.
Yeah, I mean, look at the 4 options at this point because Evan Mobley has had to shift to full-time center because Jared Allen is still missing. I do not expect him to play Monday. I do not believe that he is close to returning. your 4-man options, you're down to Dean at this point. Because, like, Isaac is going to continue to get ignored by the Celtics. And look, one game, one bad game offensively doesn't mean that he can't turn it around going into game 4. But, it was hard to consider Isaac an asset based on the way that he played tonight. JB had to go away from him completely for all the things that he brings on the defensive end of the floor, what he does for them in terms of getting out in transition, making winning basketball plays, and fighting for second chance opportunities, hustle, 50-50 balls, all that kind of stuff. If he's going to be a non-factor on offense, if he's going to be completely ignored by the Celtics defense, and he can't make them pay for that, you can't put him out there. You can't play George in this series. Marcus Morris Sr., no. So, Dean, welcome back. Play 40 minutes against the Celtics in your second game in a month, or your second game in 2 months. I mean, they just don't have a lot at that particular position at this point in the series, and it's a really precarious position to be in.
Real quick to the Isaac point, it's just really bad timing. Like a lot of the areas where the Cavs came up short tonight, because this is the first game of this series where Tatum and Brown both were kind of going. I think it would have been nice to have your best perimeter defender out there in that situation.
Probably.
And he's also been playing pretty well offensively in this series. Didn't score in the second half of game 1, but made 3 threes in the first half. That's enough where they got to look at you.
Right.
Like game 2, I think he had 11 points, 5 to 6 shooting. Probably would have liked to see him take more threes, but he made the one he took, and he had a couple of nice back cuts showing that there's more than one way to punish a defense for ignoring you. And then tonight, it just, the wheels kind of fell off, man. And this is the second lowest minute total that he's played this postseason, and there were some rough ones in the Orlando series.
Yep.
So I think it's not just that. I think his leash probably got shorter going forward because of tonight. And I think that it's a good. I'll say this: it's a good thing that the next game is at home, because that has been traditionally where Isaac has played a little bit better, shot a little bit better, played with a little bit more confidence. But he better show it quick.
It just makes Dean that much more important. You got to fill those minutes. You got to fill those minutes with somebody who's going to be productive.
So we'll have to wait and see if Dean will be available because of maybe him tweaking his knee in the fourth quarter. But go ahead, Chris.
I got nothing. Are you kidding me?
Oh, you look like you better say something.
Oh,
anyway,
no.
All right. But until next time, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. And Jimmy will throw in a couple of things too. Don't forget about my man, Jimmy. So, to get updates on Dean Wade, Jared Allen, their health, and all the things going on with the Cavs, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.